mistake. Don't be so serious.
Death Stranding has been my most anticipated game since 2016. This is a game that's been hyped and theorized about for years. Did it live up to my expectations? Yeah, but this isn't a review. Instead, this is a short dissemination about a few of the themes and inspirations throughout the game. And now the first and most prolific theme is loneliness. Now, loneliness and Death Stranding go hand in hand. As you walk through the barren landscape of a ruined America, you can't help but to feel isolated, yet blown away in awe over the beauty. And as you trudge along through the first few chapters, struggling to move through the terrain, you can't help but to feel like things are a little empty. Even when the atmosphere is filled with low roar, despite a sense of comfort, it still feels lonely. In Death Stranding, you play as Sam, a porter who delivers packages between communities. You're pretty much a UPS delivery man in the worst possible situation. Now, Sam keeps to himself, but as he's tasked to reconnect America from the President of the United States, he starts to form connections with the people he meets along the way, gaining his own little companion, BB, who is hands down the cutest frickin' thing ever. Just look at him. As mentioned before, the first few episodes are challenging and empty. But as Sam reconnects America one piece at a time, things change. Bridges appear, ladders and ropes are discovered, vehicles are scattered around. All of these things allow for easier traversal through the rough environment. They're symbols of someone that has once been there, leaving behind a valuable piece of equipment to make somebody else's experience easier. And as you travel and use your gear, you begin to do the same. Connections form between strangers. You start connecting with thousands of people beyond a surface level. They can't directly thank you beyond liking your creation, but seeing those likes impacts you in a way nothing else could. You start liking everyone's creations, from simple signs to highways. You start delivering cargo that other players couldn't. You begin donating items to help someone out. And as you continue to deliver and connect with others, paths that were once challenging and filled with obstacles are now different, changed to be easier to travel across. The trip that you and many others have walked has carved a path for others. This is one of the most unique and impactful elements of Death Stranding. It's the social strand system. As I said before, Death Stranding is all about loneliness, but also connections. It's a game that has you connecting and helping out with others in a way that makes it feel personal. Now, other games have similar aspects to this, most notably the Souls games. But it's not the same. When you see that you have earned thousands of likes from your equipment and creations, and when you see that thousands of players have benefited from that, you truly experience a connection between strangers that you would have never even known existed. This all ties into Kojima's inspirations for the game. The first stems from Kobo Abe, a Japanese musician, playwright, writer, photographer, and inventor. He has a short story titled Nawa, or The Rope in Japanese. The game actually begins with a quote from the story itself. And while I won't get into the story,
Tim Rogers
has a great translation you can read that I have linked in the description below. Now, the main inspiration that stems from this short story comes from the elements of the rope and the stick. The stick represents conflict, aggression, and combat, while the rope represents connection, unity, and helping one another out. This analogy was actually brought up by Kojima since the announcement of the game. In an interview with IGN just a few days after revealing the game, he brought up Kobo Abe's story, stating that most of your tools in action games are sticks. The communication is always through these sticks. In Death Stranding, I want people to be connected not through sticks, but through what would be the equivalent of ropes. Kojima wanted players to connect in a way that's never really been done before in a game. And I think Death Stranding was quite successful at that. Now, that's one of the inspirations for the game, but I think there's a more important one: Kojima's personal life. On November 8th, Time magazine released an interview with Kojima about the game. In the interview, Kojima said that he struggles with loneliness, stating that, "I always feel lonely in society. There are so many people who play games feeling like that, like they don't belong in this society. They don't really feel comfortable. You're all alone playing the game and you're trying to connect this fractured society by yourself. The world is beautiful, but you're small. Just a tiny speck. You feel hopeless and helpless and powerless. You feel so lonely. Kojima's Twitter is quite telling of this. Oftentimes throughout development, he'd post about himself being a cicada, referencing a book by Sean Tan. The book is about an insect who's constantly being ignored and abused by those around him at the office that he works at. It primarily focuses on the isolation of the insect, and there's no clear reason why he's being treated that way, other than the fact that he's an insect. The main parallel that can be tied to this work and Kojima's tweets is the aspect of loneliness. But I think this could also tie into Kojima's final experiences at Konami, in which he was locked in a separate room for the last 6 months of developing MGS5, speaking to his co-workers through a proxy. This is quite similar to the insect's experience, and why I think it's another big inspiration. Lastly, even though Kojima never officially stated it, I think it's likely that the whole Konami incident inspired him to make Death Stranding. The connections Kojima previously shared with Norman Reedus, Guillermo del Toro, Jeff Kingley, and especially the fans allowed him to have a platform to create and work with. The connections Kojima had with Sony, helping him visit game studios, collaborate with Guerrilla Games with a game engine, as well as receiving funding by Sony, allowed Kojima to almost instantly begin working on his new game. This is a continuous cycle, from half of his development team at Kojima Productions being ex-Konami employees, to connecting with churches, silent poets, Low Roar, Conan O'Brien, Edgar Wright, Nicholas Winding Refn, and so many others, allowed him to create the game that he wanted to make. Without all of these connections Kojima has made over the years, he wouldn't be in the position he's in now. It's no wonder why he's so focused on creating a game about making connections. Hideo Kojima is one of my biggest idols and inspirations. I've loved everything that he's done, and his art continues to impact me and many others. Yeah, it may be cheesy and funny and sometimes dumb and bizarre, but I love it. On the day of release, I saw Kojima's quote about loneliness that I discussed about earlier. It touched me in a way that not much has, if I'm being honest. I'm quite prone to loneliness, like Kojima. I've always felt lonely in society. I always felt like I never belonged, like I don't really feel comfortable. And that's something that I've always had to deal with and work on. But when I'm playing Death Stranding and making things like this, I feel connected. I feel like I'm doing something meaningful and helping out others in a way that I never thought was possible. In reflection, I find that quite